Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What evil prank have you pulled off? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Mom can't tolerate sweet things. Since she can remember, she never ate sweets. When I was 6 or so, during breakfast, Mom left her newly brewed coffee on the table. My older brother encouraged me to put more sugar as a prank, so I did. Mom came back, stirred, and then drank and spit out a rocket. We started laughing, saying it was a prank, explaining that we put extra sugar in it. She looked at us as if we were stupid. Apparently, I put salt instead. Her coffee was at sea salt level. Creative, in-depth, harmless, hilarious. Checks all the boxes. Great prank. My coworkers in the Chicago office asked me to bring back a phone book and the hotel stationery from my business trip to Kansas City. They were preparing for another coworker's bachelor party for the night before the wedding. The groom was known for drinking to an extent that he was considered legendary. After a night of drinking, he woke up on the morning of his wedding day in a hotel room. He checked the nightstand and found the Kansas City phone book. The desk was stocked with Kansas City stationery. His friends had clued the front desk staff in on what was happening and convinced them to answer his room phone, "Good morning and welcome to the Kansas City Holiday Inn." It was 5 hours till the wedding, and he was actually only a couple of miles from the venue. But the freakout was epic. That's cool. I have an extra mouse in my desk drawer at work. I have the USB plugged into the docking station of the obnoxious guy a couple cubes away. On days he is particularly obnoxious, I will take out the extra mouse and move it around every few minutes. He's never realized because it's plugged into the docking station and not his laptop. He has even had the laptop replaced, never noticed. It brings me to tears, silently laughing sometimes. I have to be careful not to overdo it. Gradually, over the course of 2 weeks, moved my coworker's monitors closer to the front edge of the desk, like a 1/4 inch per move, until they were so close the keyboard barely fit. "Stupid small desk," she grumbled near the end. I then moved them back, just as slowly over a few weeks. She never caught on. I used to work for a cruise line. A passenger asked if the crew lives on the ship full-time. I and my coworker explained that no, the crew leaves every night to fly back to Miami and then returns each morning. She walked away satisfied. After that cruise was over, our manager was sharing the passenger evaluations with us and was confused about one in particular. It was a woman who had stayed on deck 14 and had complained that she couldn't sleep at night because of the noise of the crew helicopter. Fact 1. 1,200 crew do not leave every night but do live on the ship. Fact 2. That ship didn't even have a helipad. Question. WTF was she hearing every night? People in school used to always take my Gatorade, so I took an empty bottle, filled it with dyed salt water, and let them take my drink. Not gonna lie, it was hilarious watching one person to spit the salt water in the middle of class, only for their unbelieving friend to do the same. Picked out every last marshmallow from my sister's box of Lucky Charms, then took a photo of me eating just a bowl of just Charms, printed it, and put it in the bottom of the bag. I then sealed the bag back up, hot glued the box, and back in the pantry it went. Cruel. I feel like this is something I would totally do myself, but my mother would probably throw a shoe at me. I lived in Korea for a bit. When my mom came to visit, I told my Korean girlfriend it was an American custom to greet older women by touching elbows. I told my mom the same story about Korean customs. It was a thing of beauty. They were not pleased. That's funny. Over a decade ago, I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping, and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store and a shared parking lot for the people who would leave random things in, even though it was not a public dumpster. One day we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair or box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. I worked at a fast food where the boss was too cheap to get AC installed. In the super hot summer days, we would all sweat so much that we could wring sweat out of our uniforms. There was this boy who I had a love-hate relationship with. We would always prank each other, but mine were always tame until one day. He left his drink in the back while he was flipping burgers. I grabbed a vinegar packet, cut open a corner, and put a straw directly into it and exchanged it with the straw from his drink. Moments later, I was in the front of the store and I heard him spit and scream my name while calling me a bitch. He still high-fived me. One night, I replaced every framed object in my boss's office with a picture of me making a stern face. Posters, certificates, photos, etc. Took like 3 hours because he had like 30 framed things in his office. The next day, I made sure I was out doing field work to make him sit with it most of the day. He had a lot of foot traffic to look at his office that day. I remember it like it was yesterday. At summer camp, my cabin's leader found a little snake that wasn't doing so well, so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it, so the next day, when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. Not a prank I pulled off, but one I was a victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16. Not legal, but that's a whole other mess. For the whole weekend. Saturday went well and I was happy with how it went, although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house, but the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later, I get a phone call from him saying, "Manager, and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside." Cue to me on the floor in tears, hyperventilating, while my dad is telling my mom, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. One year, my sister had to move back into my parents' house. I was like 15, she was a little older, mid-20s. April Fool's comes, and I know my sister woke up at like 6 a.m. So I took out the light in the kitchen, put Vaseline all in the refrigerator handle, and put a rubber band around the water gun on the sink. I waited for her to go in the kitchen. I was in my room pretending to be asleep, and all I heard was shit, followed by a shit, followed by her screaming my name and waking up my parents. My parents were not happy. Floor was soaked with water, and it woke both of them up. I'd do it again though. I was 9. My dad just had hernia surgery the day prior and was recuperating on the couch. Before I left for school, I put the Martha Stewart channel on and left the remote just beyond his reach. He spent 8 hours learning how to arrange pillows on a bed. He exacted his revenge 15 years later. I'd just had my emergency C-section, and he put Frozen on and left it on a loop while the entire family left for the mall and left the remote just out of my reach. Revenge is indeed a dish best served cold. Welded a coworker's boot to the floor. He'd worn out the top caps of his steel-toed boots while he was making a weld kneeling inside a large piece of equipment on steel. I put a small tack weld on his boot, so he had trouble breaking it loose and getting up. That's funny. One that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams, for those outside the US on April 1st. Should have known, right? But apparently I'm not that smart. That night, I went out with a group of friends, and when I got home, my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me the testing committee had called, that there had been an error, and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a date to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face, reactions, everything. I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. Early days of networked PCs, DOS and NetWare. I worked in a computer lab on campus. There weren't a lot of management utilities available at the time, so I and a few other student employees wrote batch scripts and small programs to automate a few things when a student or professor would log on to the network. Having that sort of access led to numerous pranks being pulled, but most of us were savvy enough to figure it out and undo the prank. However, we had 2 coworkers who liked to loaf a bit too much for our liking. They were not at all technical and had taken a lab assistant job because they thought it was easy money. They had conspired to be assigned to a remote classroom lab that rarely had any students in it who would need assistance for most of their working hours. They would just sit around and play games on the PCs while the rest of us were, working. Clearly, this could not stand. I rewrote a piece of code that was executed when every single user signed on. If the username was either one of these 2 and they were signing in on a PC in that remote classroom and it was during their working hours, it would look like an innocuous file on the network. The file merely had a few bytes in it, which noted how long it had been since the prank had last been triggered, ensuring that it would run once or twice a week maximum. If it did activate, it would launch a terminate and stay resident program, which would wait a random time between 5 and 15 minutes and then drop an image of two dudes 69ing on the monitor for a few seconds and reboot the PC. Tested it, put the compiled program in place, and deleted the source. Much hilarity ensued for the next 2 semesters. Dude was harassing my ex because he used to have her cell phone number. Was being a real effing creep. Anyways, I created an email address, signed up to Kijiji, and placed an ad offering an 80-inch 3D TV for free with some excuse about a bad breakup and not wanting her to get it. I asked people to only text or call. I then went to bed and forgot all about it until the next day at work. I get a text from my ex asking if I had done something on Kijiji. The dude was begging her to take the ad down and apologizing. I checked the email, and there were 5 pages of responses, even though I had told them not to email but to call or text. Dude's phone must have been ringing constantly. I took the ad down, and she never heard from him again. Working in a hot factory, supervisor and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop, aka nice 68 in there, while we sweat our asses off in 95 to 110 degree heat. Kind of hot and pissy and always flies around, I kept grabbing the flies alive, walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question or say I'm just cooling off, and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those effers in there one shift. He never did catch on I was doing it, and the planner was pissed swatting around there were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice, thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. Pranks involving military personnel or trainees have a special place in my heart. We used to do some crazy stuff too. In high school, there was a girl that was acting foolish and laying on top of a table that me and some friends were sitting at. Mind you, this was one of those plastic folding tables, and we were in JROTC class in the rifle range having some end-of-year free time. I then took it upon myself to fulfill a lifelong dream and tie her shoelaces together. The results were better than I could have ever imagined. My JROTC instructor entered the room and told this girl to get off the table, and that's when it all came together. She hoisted herself off the table with full confidence that her legs would work as they always do. Her uneven weighting of the table caused her and the table to flip over, while me and the guys were just sitting there. At first, I was the only one who knew of the shoelaces and was dying of laughter. My friends noticed and started laughing, and the instructor laughed some and then told her to do push-ups for causing a commotion. After typing this out, I realize it looks bad, but I assure you it was all in good fun. It was not mean-spirited, but it was evil. That's funny. One summer in college, I worked in the registrar's office, registering all the incoming freshmen. A professor who was a mentor to me was teaching freshman seminar and asked me to handpick a class for her. Straight A students, high SATs, whatever. So I did. 15 students, all named Sarah. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college and my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy, so naturally we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls with some variation in how they looked or were marked, etc. Well, I was closing one night, and I knew my coworker was opening the next morning early, so before I locked up, I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room, with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually, and that switch is immediately to the side of the door opening. So when she reached down to turn on the lights, she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say, she screamed, and it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful text, LMAO. Still proud of that one, honestly.